During a meeting with his company's employees, Magnus informs them that the whole team will have to wait to go home, as he has just been informed of a power failure on the Killscore platform. As a result, the workers on this Scottish oil platform will have to wait for transportation to the mainland, as the helicopters that were to be used to take them home have been diverted to evacuate the crew until power returns. Although Hutton and other employees hate to hear this news, there is nothing they can do but wait for the helicopters to arrive. Suddenly, the lights on the platform begin to flicker and everyone receives a blackout alert. At this point, Magnus asks Rose and Alwyn to help him find out what's going on and orders the other employees to grab their emergency kits. With the power generators down, the emergency reserve is activated and, looking out of the window, Magnus realizes that the Charlie platform is also in trouble. When he tries to connect with the crew of the neighboring platform, Fulmer receives no response and discovers that the radio connection has been cut. Meanwhile, in the control room, Alwyn realizes that something is wrong, as a landslide is causing an earthquake at the site. Under orders from Magnus, the man stops the excavation process and things begin to return to normal. Although the power has been restored, the radio is still not working and Fulmer suggests using a communicator to call for help. While Magnus walks to the helipad to get a signal, Fulmer informs the other employees that everything is under control and asks them to put away their safety equipment and return to their posts. At that moment, the entire platform begins to shake and everyone has to hold on until the earthquake is over. Suddenly, a thick fog appears on the horizon and the entire crew is trapped in the mist. In these conditions, the helicopters will never be able to get close to the platform to rescue the workers, so two employees decide to go and check the tower and, during the climb, Baz realizes that Fulmer is not behind him. Even though he was scared, he decided to continue his mission and almost had an accident when he was startled by a seagull. However, as he was attached to the safety cable, he managed to hold on and avoid falling. When he finally reaches the top, Baz meets Fulmer up there and, after fixing the tower, the pair prepare to descend. As he stoops to pick up his equipment, Baz spots a seagull about to perish and ends up falling from the tower. Immediately, his co-workers tried to help him and called for medical assistance. Luckily, the young man managed to survive the fall, but he is in a serious condition. Magnus then orders Fulmer to contact the coast to ask for help, but even after the tower's signal has been re-established, the connection is still cut off. After taking Baz to the infirmary, Kat checks the numerous injuries on his body and tries to stop the bleeding while applying medication to stop the young man feeling pain. However, when she checks his vital signs, the doctor notices that he is barely breathing and says that there is nothing she can do to save him, as Baz has suffered numerous internal injuries and cannot be operated on from the platform. Furious at seeing one of his closest colleagues in such a state, Hutton decides to leave the room and tries to calm down outside. Meanwhile, Fulmer is persistently trying to contact the coast, but receives no reply. After using the restroom, Kat returns frustrated to the operating room and is approached by Hutton, who insists that she perform Baz's surgery. At that moment, the woman attacks him, because she realizes that her coworker is just looking for someone to blame for what happened to the young man. Suddenly, Baz opens his eye and has a frightening vision of what is to come. After being beaten up, Hutton goes after Magnus to find out if he has been able to contact the Navy and blames him for sending Baz to the tower. Once again, however, the man is ignored and decides to arrange a meeting on the helipad with his co-workers to organize a rebellion. When Magnus shows up, Hutton threatens to unmask him in front of everyone because he has found some secret documents in his boss's office. At this point, Magnus has no choice but to tell the truth and says that both he and his team will soon lose their jobs, as all the local oil rigs will be shut down. According to the man, his contractors didn't want the news to spread to other employees for fear that they would resign before the platform was shut down. While Magnus tries to explain himself to his staff, a shower of ash begins to fall from the sky and Baz appears to inform his colleagues that a new mass extinction has just begun. After taking his patient back to the ward, Kat takes his blood for some tests while Rose wonders what happened at the time of the accident. Then Baz explains that, as he was about to descend from the tower, he looked towards the horizon and saw something bright hiding in the mist. Since then, he's been hearing a noise coming from inside his head telling him that a big wave is approaching. At this point, the doctor tries to calm him down and Rose says that the platform is safe because it was built at a level well above the sea, so no wave will be able to reach them. That evening, while all the staff are gathered, Alwyn looks out of the window and sees a support vessel approaching. Immediately, the man asks Lek to go upstairs and write down the messages being sent by the rescuers while he goes to warn Magnus. When he arrives at the helipad, Lek takes a pen to draw on his arm the codes that are being used as a form of communication and Fulmer uses the deck lights to respond to the craft. At that moment, the employees are gathered in the cafeteria for dinner and Baz wakes up in the infirmary. Checking his wounds, the young man realizes that he is healing, but the skin around his eyes is purple and he continues to foresee the destruction of that platform. During a conversation with her work colleagues, Heather asks if it's possible that Baz is right and Dunlin says it's impossible, as there has never been a tsunami in the North Sea in modern history. However, according to Alwyn, 8,000 years ago, a 190-kilometer section of the Norwegian continental shelf collapsed in an underwater landslide. This phenomenon caused water to move in all directions, resulting in one of the largest tsunamis in the history of the planet. The waves moved at 160 kilometers per hour, dragging up parts of the seabed bigger than a ship. While arguing with Rose about taking his people to the rescue ship, Magnus receives a visit from Kat and discovers that Baz has disappeared. Minutes later, Alwyn manages to find him, but realizes that the young man is not at all well. He's the only one who knows something bad is about to happen and he's freaking out while trying to warn his crew. After being exposed to the ashes of the mist, Lek goes to the bathroom and, when he takes off his clothes to shower, he feels the ink from his tattoos dripping onto his skin. Suddenly, the man starts to feel unwell and his body cavities start to ooze blood, even though he hasn't suffered any injuries. Minutes later, Heather knocks on the door to deliver dinner to her coworker and is startled to see the bathroom floor stained red. Immediately, the woman calls the control room and asks for help to check if Lek is still alive, as she found him unconscious next to blood. Meanwhile, Fulmer continues his mission to establish contact with the coast and sees a torch-like light approaching the platform. According to Alwyn, the support vessel remains stationary in the same place, so this means that another boat must be approaching. When she sees the tattoos running down Lek's body and discovers that some fillings were found in Baz's cabin, Rose comes to the conclusion that the inorganic materials present in the bodies of the two men who were exposed to the ashes have suffered rejection. Worried about what might happen to the rest of the team, Magnus orders Dunlin to make sure no one leaves. The problem is that, at that moment, Alwyn and Fulmer are outside checking what that light they saw was and decide to check the boats to make sure no one is trying to get out. During the check, Fulmer ends up hurting his hand and when he looks at the deck lights, he realizes that Hutton is calling the support vessel. At this point, the pair mobilize to try to stop him, but realize that the door is locked, so Fulmer tries to get his colleague's attention while Alwyn tries to find another way through. When he finally manages to get inside, Fulmer reveals that Hutton is trying to attract the attention of the support vessel and tells him that the ashes have stopped falling. While Magnus and Dunlin try to stop Hutton from causing an accident, as the crew of the support vessel can't see the platform due to the fog, Alwyn spots Baz and decides to go after him. When he finds him, he tries to convince the young man to go back inside the platform, but Baz puts his hand on his chest and he faints. Just then, Dunlin appears and pulls out the body of his partner, who was about to be hit by the boat. When the support vessel leaves, Magnus appears and tries to revive Alwyn, but soon realizes that he is no longer alive. According to Kat, he probably drowned, but Alwyn had no contact with seawater, so no one can explain what happened. After contacting the support vessel, Magnus discovers that his team has been abandoned, as the crew is on its way to Charlie. After analyzing the ashes she collected, Rose reveals that she inserted a blood sample into the particles and discovered that there are millions of living organisms present in the ashes. These parasitic spores attach themselves to organic substances and then repair the damage, eliminating any impurities. If Rose and Kat's theory is correct, it will be necessary to keep an eye on everyone to contain the contamination, as the parasites tend to spread in search of new hosts. When the fog becomes less thick and the crew can look out of the window, they realize that the Charlie platform is on fire and Heather tries to convince her colleagues to use the lifeboats to rescue the possible survivors. However, the boats don't have enough fuel to make the round trip, as they were only designed to accommodate the crew until rescue arrived. After losing 2 members of his team in a single day, Magnus decides to reunite with the rest of the crew and reveals that they will need to remain there until the helicopters or a new support vessel shows up to rescue them. Now that the fog has cleared and the ash has stopped falling, Magnus sends out some search parties to look for Baz, as Rose needs a sample of his blood to continue studying the parasite. While some of his colleagues are looking for him, Baz is communicating with the bioluminescent creatures in the oil wells. During her research, Rose discovers that the spores found in the ashes are also lodged in the fossils extracted from the field. The scientists' analysis indicates that these microorganisms appeared shortly before a mass extinction event, which took place at the end of the Permian period, 300 million years ago, when around 95% of all life on Earth disappeared. The big problem is that the oil being extracted by that platform came from the Permian period, which means that fossil fuel is full of spores. While searching for Baz, Garrow ends up being attacked by the young man and is found by his friends minutes later. At this point, Hutton spots the spores on the surface of the oil reservoirs and is surprised to see a kind of plant growing there. Suddenly, a new tremor occurs and, while trying to hold on, Dunlin realizes that Garrow is acting suspiciously. It's not long before he realizes that the young man has been infected and, to avoid being used as a laboratory guinea pig, Garrow decides to run away. During the earthquake, the platform's power supply is interrupted, so Magnus asks Fulmer to help him restore it. Seeing Baz trying to run away, Heather decides to go after him to try to convince him to go back to the infirmary, but the young man says that now his visions are getting clearer and clearer. Just then, Garrow appears and seems to be suffering from the same symptoms as Baz. The young man's plan is to infect Heather so that she can join them, but Hutton appears just in time and uses his flashlight to lead them away from the young woman. During the earthquake, the flame that burns the toxic gases from the extraction process goes out and Fulmer decides to take the risk of lighting it again. Otherwise, the lives of all his co-workers will be in danger. However, to ensure the success of the mission, the man decides to remove his safety equipment and walks to the end of the scaffolding before firing. After the flare is fired, the flame flares up again, but as it is too close, Fulmer ends up being affected and his companions have to run to rescue him. After putting out the flames, Magnus and Easter take their colleague to the infirmary. Worried about her boyfriend, Rose stays by his side in the ward until he wakes up and, when she goes out to talk to Kat, the woman discovers that she is pregnant. Now that a new microorganism is spreading across the platform, the nurse is afraid of what might happen to her baby and Fulmer tries to reassure her. But Kat knows that there is no guarantee that she will make it home. Just then, Magnus asks Rose to come into the cockpit and Dunlin reveals that Baz is trying to open the well, but the pressure would cause the platform to explode. In an attempt to stop him, Magnus enlists Easter's help to send an ROV to close the well's triple valve and, through the vehicle's camera, the team realizes that there are numerous circular cracks in the ocean floor. According to Magnus, a few days ago, the well was checked and nothing like it was seen down there. This means that the symbol appeared recently. After closing the valve, Easter takes the vehicle back to the platform and suddenly the team realizes that the satellite signal has returned. Immediately, Magnus tries to contact the Coast Guard for help and manages to request an emergency rescue. Just then, Kat contacts his wife and tells her that both she and the baby are fine. During the conversation, Casey reveals that the city is suffering from numerous power surges and Kat panics when she discovers that the fog that was covering the platform has moved into the city. Suddenly, the signal was cut once again and the connection was interrupted before Magnus could confirm his location. While trying to re-establish the internet signal, Fulmer looks at the burns on his skin and realizes that they are healing and that he was infected when he cut his hand. When Easter appears, Fulmer hears Baz asking for his help and soon realizes that this voice is coming from his head. Frightened, the man runs to the bathroom to check that his other wounds have healed and is visited by Rose. After revealing to his girlfriend that he is infected, Fulmer tells her that he is hearing strange things and, when Rose leaves, he sees Baz's image in the mirror. In an attempt to understand what is going on, Fulmer goes to meet Baz and ends up being caught by Kat, who decides to go after him. At this point, Rose appears and tries to convince her boyfriend to return to the base, but he says he needs to get away from the crew to keep everyone safe. Even after hearing this, Kat refuses to give up on her friend and, as she runs after him, the nurse comes across a corridor full of spore particles that are clustering close to her belly. Terrified, the woman remains motionless as she watches the microorganisms at work, but Rose soon appears and drags her out of the place. That night, the crew saw some lights heading in their direction and began to hope that the Coast Guard had sent a ship to rescue them. While everyone is putting on their immersion suits to evacuate, Baz senses the presence of new crew members approaching. Instead of sending a rescue ship, Pictor, the company Magnus and his team work for, sends one of its employees to check the production module. When asked what happened to the Charlie platform, Harish, one of the only survivors, says that it all started when Coke climbed aboard. The man installed a new piece of equipment that reversed the entire production process. Instead of extracting oil from the well, he was sending something down through injectors. Then, with the arrival of the fog, the entire crew panicked and began to disappear, but Coke remained in the control room. At one point, something went wrong and the platform exploded, but Coke and some other members of the team managed to survive. While checking the names of all the passengers who have come on board recently, Heather realizes that Coke's name is not on the list of crew members on the Charlie platform. The woman then meets with Easter and Harish and reveals that she couldn't find Coke's name in any database. At this point, Rose is trying to figure out the meaning of the circles that have been spotted on the ocean floor and discovers that the gap between each of those rings corresponds to the time between each of the 5 major mass extinction events. Therefore, the last ring corresponds to the current period and is almost closing, which means that a new mass extinction is about to take place. When he meets Baz and Garrow, Fulmer discovers that they are trying to shut down the platform once and for all in order to repair the damage caused by the extraction process. While investigating Coke's past, Heather discovers that he was using a false name to board the Charlie, and Harish realizes that Pictor already knew about the existence of the spores, which is why Coke was sent. With the promise that he will help all the crew to return home after fulfilling their mission, Coke convinces Hutton and two other men to go to the warehouse and use the compressed CO2 tubes to inject the gas into the fire suppression system. In doing so, Fulmer and all the other infected will be knocked out and then safely removed so that Coke can take control of the pump. When he realizes the attack, Baz refuses to flee and asks Fulmer to turn off the fire suppression system while he stays to protect the place. However, instead of just causing the infected pass out, the CO2 begins to eliminate them and, seeing Garrow collapse before he runs out of air, Dunlin and his colleagues decide to flee before they're next. Within seconds, Baz and Fulmer are also affected and pass out. When Hutton and Murchison cross into the safe zone, Coke closes the door and Dunlin is trapped in the production module because he couldn't get through in time. Desperate, Hutton tries to help his friend stay calm while Murchison rushes to the control room to force Coke to open the door. However, it's too late, as the man ends up losing his life soon afterwards. When he gets to the control room and finds out what happened, Magnus uses his password to open the door and Rose goes after Fulmer. As soon as she enters the module, the scientist finds Dunlin's body and realizes that all life around that place has been destroyed. Soon after, she finds Fulmer passed out and, after blocking the fire suppression system, Rose tries to drag her boyfriend out of there, but soon realizes that she doesn't have enough strength to do it. When oxygen is restored, the spores come back to life and Fulmer wakes up, so Rose helps him up to get out of there. Then Baz also wakes up and finds Garrow's body lifeless. At that moment, the last circle closes, marking the end of another era. When interrogating Coke, Magnus confirms the fact that Pictor already knew about the existence of the spores and sent the man to eliminate them. As these microorganisms are capable of converting oil into organic matter, the company wanted to eliminate them to ensure that oil extraction was not compromised, but now Coke knows that the spores are much more dangerous than he imagined. In an attempt to communicate with Baz, Fulmer connects to the spores and has a vision. At that moment, he understands the plan of that ancient microorganism and discovers that it intends to unleash a new mega tsunami, like the one that happened 8,000 years ago. All this time, the creature has been trying to find out whether humans are its enemies and, thanks to the latest attacks, this hypothesis has been confirmed. If Rose's theory is right and those spores are living organisms that appeared on Earth hundreds of millions of years ago, they could be scattered all over the planet's oceans. Therefore, if an attack were to happen, the entire human race would be at risk of extinction. However, instead of trying to communicate with the creature through Baz, Magnus decides to ask for Coke's help to destroy the thing. When he discovers his boss's plan, Fulmer tries to convince him that it's a bad idea, because that ancestor has survived the worst catastrophes on the planet, so it will be practically impossible to eliminate it. Knowing that this microorganism is extremely intelligent, Rose says that there is still time to sign a peace agreement and convinces Magnus to go and meet Baz. Meanwhile, Coke asks Harish to follow him to the control room and tells him that Pictor is sending helicopters to rescue them, as there is a safety protocol that guarantees rescue if the platforms go more than 3 days without communication. However, Coke doesn't want the rest of the team to know this, as he needs to eliminate the spores before leaving the platform. When he receives a visit from his friends, Baz says it's too late, because now he can no longer communicate with his ancestors. Now that they have come to the conclusion that humans are enemies, the microorganisms have given up on establishing any connection with them. When he realizes that only a few people will be able to board the helicopter, Harish quickly notifies the crew through the megaphones and everyone starts running to the helipad. Just then, the ocean floor begins to crack, causing another earthquake, and Coke flees after hearing a Pictor helicopter approaching the platform. However, when he arrives at the helipad, Coke finds Hutton and the man threatens to throw him into the ocean. Luckily, Kat shows up just in time and convinces his friend not to do it, as he'll end up being arrested when he gets back to shore. Meanwhile, Rose is trying to establish contact with the ancestors in order to convince them that humans are not a threat. However, as the ocean floor is destroyed, the tremors intensify and the team must get out of there before everyone is buried. When the helicopter lands, Hutton asks Easter to get as many people on board as possible while he waits for Magnus and the rest of the team to arrive. Instead of going out with his friends, Baz decides to stay in the production module to continue trying to re-establish the connection with the spores, giving his friends the chance to escape. Arriving at the helicopter, Magnus and his team see a gigantic tsunami approaching and everyone manages to take off just before being hit. When the wave passes over the installation, the platform remains standing, but no one could have survived inside. As the wave is on its way to the mainland, the pilots decide to take the opposite route and all the crew begin to worry about the fate of their families, as thousands of people are about to be affected by this catastrophe. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.